Hey everybody, I'm Neil. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Man, oh man, what a heat wave this has been. Oh my goodness. Where are you spending tonight? Maybe you're sitting in front of a fan, whoa, or air conditioner. Felt good. Maybe you're one of those cool people that has a nice big pool to lay beside and you're right there. Yeah, thank you to my lovely assistant. Anyway, if you're the type of person that likes the heat, I have a suggestion for you. Not about how to stay cool or get cooled off, but how to enjoy the heat. Why don't you become a political leader? Maybe premier or prime minister. Wouldn't it be awesome to wake up every single day on the hot seat? Yeah, right. Anyway, tonight we have the chance to talk with a man who probably feels like he has been on the hot seat for over the last 3.5 months. Our Premier, Mr. Blaine Higgs. Only this time he's not on the hot seat. He is joining a group of us pastors to sit down and discuss where we've been and the issues we've been dealing with around our province and in our churches. And as we attempt to reopen the province and reopen our churches, some of the issues we are facing. It was great to be able to sit with him, glean from him, and just bounce some ideas off of him and questions off of him as we all try to figure out how to reopen our doors for public gatherings. It was great to know we have his support too. And it was also really neat to get a chance to get to know the man behind the microphone a bit more, as well as about 12 or 13 other pastors from around our province. Some of them I never knew before. So without further ado, here is our conversation with our Premier, Mr. Blaine Higgs. Well, welcome everybody. We're so glad that you've joined us tonight, and we are so appreciative as pastors here in this congregation from all around the province of New Brunswick to have the opportunity to talk with our Premier, Mr. Blaine Higgs. Welcome, Mr. Higgs. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. Looking forward to the discussion.
I would like to know, I think we'd all like to know, we know you as our Premier right now. We know you as the man who stands in front of the microphone every day, making a new announcement about the progress or even the problems related to COVID-19. But can you tell us a little something about Blaine Higgs, the person, not the Premier?
Yeah, it's some people, think, well, I didn't have a real sense of humor, and actually, that's what my family, I guess, enjoy the most of when I kind of get away from the cameras and have a family moment. So I have 4 daughters, Marcia and I. We've been married for going 42 years this summer. We hope to have the family all home at some point and spend time in the country. I grew up in a very small community, and I went to Canterbury High School, so I grew up in the community right on the border out in Forest City. I enjoy a lot of sports activities. We ski as a family regularly, and regularly once a year we go, and I've done that for a long time. Swimming, boating, fishing, if I get a chance. Fishing, I have 2 hours in already this year. That may be my limit. Last year I think I got an hour, so I've already exceeded last year's. I enjoy time with family. I enjoy time in the woods, and I'm a country boy at heart, and that's kind of where my background and my roots. My dad passed away 5 years ago, and of course this past weekend was Father's Day weekend. It's great to hear from the girls from all over the world. I have a daughter in Bangkok and a daughter in Guelph with 3 grandchildren, a daughter out west in Moose Jaw, and a daughter here in Quispamsis with 1 grandchild. So we all connected on the weekend, and I think about growing up in the country, the work ethic that you learned, and the many variety of jobs that we did in the country, because we were away from the nearest retail was in Woodstock, about 40 miles away, and so you learn a lot growing in the country, and a lot of independence and fixing things, and I love working on small stuff and working on a small engine or snowmobile motors. My wife and I have a motorcycle. We travel on that as well. This year we've been on it 2 hours as well. But this is her birthday weekend, so she made a deal. She said we need to go for somewhere on the bike, so it'll be somewhere in New Brunswick.
Nice.
Anyway, enough about me.
Well, yeah, we definitely we can see your sense of humor. I don't know if your Father's Day card was like the one I got from my daughter, but one of the things she wrote was, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be as funny as you think you are." And that was
That hurts, doesn't it?
well, I thought it was 100% accurate.
Yes, I know.
I think
I
I'm
know.
hilarious. So,
Well, the thing that is always interesting, my wife, if I'm telling a story about these things, my wife will get to kind of correct me through the process. And, you know, sometimes there's a punchline coming up, and the story's, you know, you're maybe the fish was bigger than it really was. You kind of think this was a bigger catch, and I said, well, Marcia, that's irrelevant to the whole story. This is just part of, you know, the humorous part coming. But yeah, it works fine.
oh, that's funny. Well, we would just be guessing, but can you give us a little bit of a snapshot, Mr. Higgs, as to what a day has looked like for you in the midst of the pandemic?
Well, certainly it shifted. I guess if I went back to, like this is my 10th year in politics. I had a 33-year career with Irving Oil, and I retired in 2010 in the spring, and I got elected in the fall. And went into finance. So I was Minister of Finance for 4 years. And we were building a culture of kind of action, but a culture of engaging people to be part of the decisions, and because there's such a tremendous workforce here. So now you zoom that ahead. We lost the 2014 election, and so we were in opposition for 4 years. I never intended to be in this position. It was never on my bucket list. I felt we could make better decisions, and we could value people's contributions and make a real difference in our province. And I live with that, to do what's right, and it'll make the difference for people to be part of that. Where I found myself with the COVID is that we ended up putting a budget together we were very proud of. It was elected unprecedented timelines in the Ledge. In about 17 minutes, it was fully approved. And in about 3 weeks, it was of little relevance because the economy just went to pot. So it was that was a shocking experience, that all of a sudden we were forced to look heavily at how we prevented the spread of the virus in our province. So that started with the schools, and it started with a school trip because we had our March break early, and there were students that had gone to Italy, and Italy were at that time, you know, experiencing an outbreak. So we immediately isolated those kids when they came home. Basically said, you can't come back into school, and within a week, so they're out and didn't come into school because we're going to isolate them for 14 days. But within that week, things were changing quickly, and then we ended up closing schools, and then it snowballed from there to protecting our borders. So who would ever thought, you know, 6 months ago that we would be putting safety compliance officers at our borders provincially to prevent the free flow of citizens throughout our country. It just wouldn't have been even considered. So, but I do feel it played a huge role in our ability to achieve what we did. I saw unprecedented changes within the Ledge because the Ledge closed. Departmental borders came down. People were working across departments within government. We had a small crew here. I say small, but they were working diligently on, you know, health records, on the businesses that were changing, on trying to keep government operating and moving with certainly what we do for social assistance, for all of the programs that exist, to keep them rolling. And it was amazing to watch. I saw people coming to the plate like I had never seen before, working whatever hours, weekends, and we were doing this together. The days were long, the hours were long, but you felt like, you know, you had a mission, and it was to protect the citizens of the province. And so it was a joint mission. And so what we saw, which is not unusual, is when you have a common focus, you often can get alignment. So one of the success factors that I think was very relevant was we had all party leaders meeting weekly to discuss the issues around the virus protection and the rules we're putting in place. Now that's unprecedented in the province, and unprecedented probably in the country. We were meeting, sharing all the information, and making decisions together with our own cabinet, with the other leaders. So I credit a lot of our success through that was, again, so many people putting down their typical opposition guards and just getting on with the job. So when you think of that, you think, well, why can't we have that same ability with other ills of society that we've experienced over and over, generational, and yet we can't seem to get traction. We can't get meaningful changes in whether it be on our social assistance scale, whether it be on the issues around which is current today, the systemic racism. How do we deal with issues that are prevalent, but we haven't got traction on? And I feel that it's directly related. We can't get a consistency of focus on major items from one government to the next.
Gotcha. I mean, everyone's life has changed, not just churches and church leaders, but we are appreciative of the chance to talk through maybe some of the issues that we're facing as leaders within the church. One of the most regular gathering places that we have in our province, our country, and our world. So I think we immediately see the potential for good, and we also see the potential for danger as we think about a second wave of the coronavirus. So this conversation is just wanting to clarify and express, I guess, our desire to be part of the solution in our communities and in our province. And so I'm going to turn it to some of the good folks in this chat. Maybe Kevin Matthews or Todd, maybe you guys would like to launch in with the question just about general gatherings and something like that to get us started. You guys can wrestle that to the ground.
Sure, I'll get us started. I think Premier Higgs, you've answered some of my question already on Friday with your announcement. I'm Kevin Matthews from the Point Church. We're a multi-site church in northeastern New Brunswick, and so we've got a location up in the Bathurst area and a couple here in Miramichi. But all of that is online these days, thanks to COVID-19. I really appreciate all the work you do for us behind the scenes. You certainly have a thankless job many, many days. And so today I certainly want to be amongst some voices saying thank you to you. With the announcement on Friday, it would seem like most of the restrictions on the in-person gatherings in churches have been eliminated. I think there's just two remaining, and I just want to make sure that I understand them correctly, that as long as we can have physical distancing, that there's no firm number capped, and that really the only requirement at this point other than physical distancing is having people kind of check in and give us that contact information. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. The idea is taking advantage, as one said, in the size of the facility and the ability to follow the public health rules related to different facility sizes. So that's all that exists in that sense, and everyone that attends should have a mask with them, so that if there is any proximity that doesn't follow the public health rules, and the mask is put on. Also, it's important to, and usually in the churches you'd know, but who's attending? Because if an outbreak happens, we want to be able to have the ability to contact trace and go back and find out everyone that was there. So it's important to have records, so which you likely would know in some fashion anyway, but it's good to have that available. There's been discussion, about the singing aspect. Well, we know that the virus is, if someone has it, it can easily spread. It's airborne. It can move. Singing is a way that it certainly could spread more easily. So I guess it's difficult in a church. I mean, I'm a regular church member, as you know. I won't say it's not your competition. We're pretty aligned, I think, in the Wesleyans and the Baptist. So the idea of having a singing and having distancing, because it is a concern, and of course the demographic is a concern too, which makes it even more important to follow the rules. So I think that you can have your layout. WorkSafe can evaluate what you set up. It's not necessary for that in order for you to start, because the public health rules are very clear. So you can make those choices yourself. But if you'd like to have a second opinion, we can have someone run through your layout and actually give you some thoughts on any particular concerns.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Mr. Higgs, nice to talk with you today. Todd McLeod, I'm in Jacksonville. So based on your introduction, I know you know where that is.
I do, Camp Shiptyhawk. I can say this, Art. Certainly my wife attended Camp Shiptyhawk when she was a youngster.
Awesome. My daughter's there this summer for the 6th or 7th year, and Kevin Matthews up there. You spent a few years at Chickahawk.
That's right. In the good old days, I was the director there for a while.
There you go. All right.
I'm wondering about, we're starting to think about as we set up our facility for, physical distancing and seeing sort of just how many people we can work into the room. As we think about cluster groups, so people within the same household obviously can sit together. I'm just wondering if you get some clarity on just what those cluster groups would involve or who they would involve. I'm assuming it's only people currently living under the same roof, but perhaps you could speak to that.
Well, ideally, when we started the 2-family bubble, the purpose was to get close family and friends back together. So, because we knew that the social aspect of this isolation was as much of a health risk as some of the other aspects of it. So that's expanded to open up to groups of 10 or so that you could have. So I would say this. If you're able, people that normally associate, so if it's family, that's fine. Then if they're able to be placed in the congregation in a location, that's the safest thing to do. If it's people that normally associate with each other on a routine basis through the week and they're able to sit in the same proximity in the service, that is the safest thing to do. And I would encourage that. And I know that's not necessarily easy, but it does minimize the risk. And I guess that's what this is all about at this stage, is how do we minimize the risk? So anyone who comes as normally would be visiting with themselves through the week or others, you could have them certainly sit together, and that would be sit together in a way that maybe is a little different because they normally visit each other at their households.
Excellent. Rebecca, would you like to field your question with Mr. Higgs about children?
Yes, hello, sir. I am the children's pastor at St. John First Wesleyan Church. And so kids is my big concern at the moment. What are your feelings? What are any restrictions that we need to be taking care of with our little ones?
Well, it's weird. As you know, our daycares have been set up and we limit them with 15, but in effect, they are pretty close to each other in the daycare setting. These would be kids that would be coming and going routinely because their parents would be dropping them off, so the same kids are associated with each other. I would say that you can do the same thing in the church building and with your daycare in the church building. It's always when a new group come in, it's always a bit of a risk. Like, are there any concerns? So today in New Brunswick, we haven't had people traveling outside the province. So if that is the case, then the kids, we don't have any community transmission within the virus here in New Brunswick, which was always a concern. And the community transmission is when you can't really identify where it came from. In our case, we've been able to track where and they were all travel related. I think we might have had one, but at the end of the day, we found they were all travel related. And the Campbellton outbreak is all travel related. So that's the key, is that you could start up and operate the way you have with small kids. And I guess you're looking at probably, 6 and under or something like that. Is that right?
Well, we do for all of elementary, so up to grade 5, yeah.
So you could certainly, I would say, set up in those groups, and they're at this point be quite safe in doing that, because that's what we're doing in the daycares elsewhere.
Will we need to check temperatures upon arrival?
It's a great precaution to have. We're not mandating that, but if you have the ability to do that in some fashion, every day I come in here, they point a gun at me and take a fire shot. And so I have a temperature, and we have like the 3 or 4 questions just so we're experiencing any symptoms of any kind. It's certainly good to have the questionnaire asking, someone feeling different than they should be. and the parents asking about any of that, because it's just an added precaution. And if someone is feeling any of the symptoms, because we're testing for anything now. So if the list of 6 or 8 symptoms, if anyone has any one of them, we'll test for it. Mind you, usually when I look down that list, it seems like you could always have one of them. And so you have to be judgmental in that sense. But I guess the point is we will test anyone.
Does anyone have a follow-up question in that area? Children's ministry, protocols, and things like that? Troy?
I do have a follow-up question.
Oh, Martin.
Premier Higgs, welcome. My name's Martin Kreplin. I'm the pastor at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Moncton. And I've been admiring your leadership through this difficult time. It's been encouraging to see, and appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. We've noticed that through the Hospital for Sick Kids in Toronto, there's been a recommendation there of a normalization of school activities without social distancing or masking. And that recommendation comes out of a citation of psychological benefits for children being greater than the risks of COVID-19 infections, and particularly in that demographic. And I'm wondering if any consideration has been given to making recommendation along those lines for both schools and churches in the province of New Brunswick.
I think that I read that article as well, and I do agree. I think that we will evolve even more so over the summer to get to a point where either the schools are open or whether they're not. Right now, we're at a point of saying we're trying to limit the school class size to 15 for the younger grades. But then in high school, it'll be more or less staggering days. But to your point, I think what we're learning here is that the virus has had little impact on the younger demographics. And so it's almost to the point, and that's where we have to be careful. And I mentioned earlier about the demographics in the churches. It's almost like we're going to need to separate ourselves going forward. So I'm in the 60 plus category. And of course, the older you get, the more a risk it is to an individual. I think we'll get to the point that we're saying, okay, the younger generation and their families have to kind of get on with life and moving forward in a way that it doesn't impact them quite the same, but they have to be cognizant of not to impact others. Because we found that many people younger can have the virus and not know it, not feel any symptoms. And we're about to do some testing that we will be able to determine how many people have actually had it and didn't know it. So I would say that this could evolve over the coming months, where we will get closer to a point where schools may just open. And what we'll have to do is find ways that when those families are closer together, then we have, if that happens, because that's not the current plan, but if that happens, then the studies start to reveal more and more of that. You would have to find a way that the families, because those kids and their parents, don't create a virus expansion to their grandparents and to other members that they would know that are older. That'll be the challenge if we get to that stage. But I think we're seeing it evolve, and I think it's part of learning to live with COVID. So at this point, we have a different plan, but it's certainly, I think we're going to learn more about how that's going to evolve and change in the coming weeks and months.
Excellent. Troy, did you still have a follow-up question there?
I guess Troy Matchett, Bucktush, New Brunswick, honor you for your hard work. Thank you so much. Just a question. So we can have multiple groups of children as long as there's only 15. If they're spread out in other locations, like younger ones upstairs, older kids downstairs, and adults, as long as you can social distance them all in the building, we're good.
That's the ideal, Troy, and I think the reality is going to be we're going to find. So we start in that fashion, trying to social distance as much as we possibly can, and doing that or wearing masks. But as we kind of open things up, as we're doing just now, and as we have, containment within New Brunswick, we feel a certain, I guess, comfort that we don't have a risk here in our province. And that's why we've been pretty focused on the borders. But that's going to change coming the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, because we've got to get back into life in New Brunswick and in the Maritimes and in Canada. So right now, if you're able to do what you just described, that's excellent. That'd be perfect. But I could see as we move forward, it's going to be a little more difficult, more people, more kids, and we'll be probably having greater numbers that'll get together. But if you can start that way and adhere to that, that's the safest manner for sure. And get used to it, and then we go from there.
I may just have a short follow-up to that, Mr. Higgs. As the borders do open, as we're predicting in a few weeks, is there concern about us? I guess one question would be, what should our ushers and greeters be asking those questions that are typical of protocol in a store at the front door? Or are we just having people sign in? Do they leave us their email address and phone number? But is there concern about people from other provinces coming into our churches?
Well, when we open up, the first phase will be with Atlantic Canadians. And so, and I'm working through that with the other premiers now, and we've had these discussions ongoing, as you've heard me mention, about early July. Our goal is to open up with the other Atlantic provinces without the isolation, like the 14-day isolation if we're traveling between the Atlantic provinces, unlike which is our situation with Quebec and Ontario and other Canadian provinces at this point. So I think if you're recording, and we're not asking people to say, where are you from, other than to know if there's a contact. Like, it's not to say you can't come in. It's say, well, if we have an outbreak, we want to be able to contact you. And if you're just passing through, because you're traveling through New Brunswick, and we have no idea who you are or where you're from, we can't contact you if there's a problem. So that's the reason for asking, and that's the reason for recording, not to screen entrants or to screen attendees. And I think that needs to be clear that we're doing that just for contact. When we finally agree to open up, which we're looking at over the next few weeks, we anticipate free movement within Atlantic Canada, because in all cases throughout Atlantic Canada, the current situation is based on travel. So when I say travel, Nova Scotia doesn't have a community problems. PEI is in excellent condition, and Newfoundland doesn't have community problems. So with none of our provinces having community transmission, then the travel's not within our own Atlantic bubble, it's within outside. And I've been under a lot of pressure to open up to Quebec and Ontario. And I'm saying, well, let's give them another couple of weeks, and maybe a little beyond that into mid or late July. So we see the changes in Montreal and in Toronto. Excellent.
So a phone number or an email address is sufficient?
Yeah, just some way that you can reach them and make sure they understand why. So
Great.
It's not we're going to chase them down the road or follow them with a police car.
Okay. Andrew, let's jump to you. You had a question for Mr. Higgs.
Sure. Hello, sir.
Hey.
Andrew Bauer from Evangel Church in Bathurst, New Brunswick. And as others have said, have appreciated yours and Dr. Russell's leadership and your teams over the last few months. I had a question about continuing to expand the numbers, but that's a moot point now. But my other question was, our church has had the honor of being involved in some food security projects over the last 3 months. We've jumped into some community service opportunities, partnering with other organizations and so on. So my question is, what are some of the greatest social needs that you see developing because of the economic challenges that we've had here in our province and in the days ahead? And how do you see the church helping to ease some of these struggles for families in our communities?
mental health. We have, that was one of the main concerns with kind of having the closure and the restrictions to households, was the lack of social connections in that building, to a point where, it became more evident, the stress in mental health cases as a result of not having that interaction. We've apparently seen, we didn't know one way or the other what we'd see in terms of family disputes and things. And I won't say it's been, skyrocket or anything like that, because it hasn't. But there is a slight increase, and changes. So you're seeing, I guess you learn, if you have your family all in one house for 3 months, you learn just how close you really are. And maybe that's been a strain. So I think what the church, and certainly it's been my experience too, and our family, is that there's a social interaction there that you build with the congregation and with your friends, and you have your own bubble that you're able to associate with, who then reach out into other parts of the community to identify issues that maybe otherwise wouldn't be found. So having, to your connection, Andrew, back to your church and back to what services you can provide to provide an interaction and social support, in addition to, I know, the programs that would be offered, it's extremely valuable, and more so now than it likely was. It's always valuable, but likely it was 6 months ago or 3 months ago, because people are now have gone under a bit of a strain that we're trying to bring back. And with the challenges we see in the province, many of the more acute challenges are related to drug addiction. The crystal meth is an issue that I've spoken often with our authorities about. How do we really start to zero in here and make a difference? Because people's character and attitude seems to just all is lost when this crystal meth has been a major challenge. So we're not alone in New Brunswick, but it's an area that the more we can identify in the community, the more we can zero in on proactive measures.
Sure, that's great. Thank you.
Any follow-up question there from somebody? I'm doing my best CBC impersonation here, asking that.
All right.
Let's jump to, sorry, I lost my place. Let's jump to back to Todd. Maybe Todd, you had I think a question about some procedural stuff within the building as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's probably been answered. You've spoken about the list, and we understand that, and I suppose things such as bathrooms and that sort of thing, again with physical distancing and sort of the extra effort given to cleaning as people come in and out, that sort of thing. Any comments about that, Mr. Higgs?
Well, the cleaning, and also to have some folks maybe at the door, so everybody doesn't go in. If it's a use bathroom, then you don't have 3 or 4 people in there at once at different stalls or whatever. That'd be good to screen that, so you're letting one person in at a time, depending on the size. But most generally in the church, I would say probably one at a time, if you could do that. And then the cleaning after each one, the disinfectant. That's the safest thing to do. There isn't any question about that. And then of course you can always announce on the pulpit for next Sunday that use the washroom before you get there.
I'm sure it's just that simple.
Oh, I know it's not.
No one will need to go if we say that, right?
Oh, of course not. No. And don't hand out any water or anything, because that always, yeah.
Yeah, coffee service.
I have a quick follow-up question to that. Troy from Bucktush. If you have kids in one area, adults in the other area, can they still share a bathroom?
Well, if the protocol's followed, if you're still doing it in terms of cleaning and minimizing the numbers in at any one time, that could work. I mean, if you have the facilities to isolate, that's perfect, because the kids are different. But if you can't, just follow that protocol and limit the numbers.
I have a follow-up as well. Graham Perry from St. John First, lead pastor. Just was wondering if there are any government grants for cleaning money that could be used to clean our churches. I'm totally joking on this, but just thought I could ask, and if we could get free money, that'd be great. 'Cause
I
there's
knew
a
I
lot of
wouldn't get.
cleaning involved. So
I knew I wouldn't get through a complete interview without the request. Like, there's always one.
Yeah, there's.
So, sorry, go ahead, Brad.
I am joking. The two I am curious about, like, we're looking to launch 2 services, and so what is it good to have them spaced out? Like, we're looking at a Saturday night, Sunday morning, so that way there's plenty of time in between to do proper cleaning and things like that. But do you see any issue with if you were doing 2 Sunday morning? What kind of space time do we need between if we were to do that route?
Well, you'd have to judge that by the size of your facility and how long it would take to clean it reasonably. And having the hand wash, the Corel or typical type of just the sanitizer is certainly very useful for anyone coming in to use it right off the bat. That way they're not bringing something in from the outside. And many places will have a hand sanitizer bottle right there as you come in. And that is helpful to keep it clean. But I would say it judges on your facility how big it is and how quickly you can clean. But you'd want ideally a minimum of an hour, or maybe a little longer, but it depends on the size of your facility. But you don't want the overlap there if you can avoid it, because that would mess up your cleaning protocol.
If anyone in the call would like to send an offering to Graham, he'll leave his email address here and we can send him an e-transfer or something.
I believe it
Paul,
was your idea, Neil, from a text message from last night, actually.
Yeah. Well, we're looking at that. Just in all seriousness, we are looking at how because we know companies and organizations have incurred additional costs, and here's what it works out. And we're trying to figure out how to do this, because if the government does anything, you multiply it by all over the province. And so what seems like a token effort maybe to one particular operation is a huge expense for the entire province, because it magnifies. And so we're trying to say, okay, are we able to get up and Adam and I up and running, because it's important to do that. We want our cultural systems, we want our Christian systems, we want all of our institutions to be up and running. So can they do that, and are they able? And it's the same with the businesses we are working with. We're trying to say what's needed to get up and going. If you can get up and going the best you can on your own, that's wonderful, because everything I do is spending taxpayer money. And I always remind people that it's a boomerang effect.
right. Paul, can we jump to you?
Sure. Thanks again, Mr. Premier, for taking the time to do this with us. Really appreciate it. I lead an international ministry called I Am Ministries, and we have a focus on people with disabilities. And we have donors and groups in a number of different provinces, as well as in the United States. My question is, and you've answered it partly, I guess, earlier. My question concerns the game plan going forward regarding provincial and international borders, as well as a possible timeline on the continued practice of isolation upon returning to New Brunswick. So that's my question.
Okay. Well, right now, we hope to be in a position early July where the Atlantic region, the 4 provinces, will not require any 14-day isolation. So that's movement throughout Atlantic Canada. We did make an addition last Friday, which was related to employees that were working across the country. So in other words, if you're flying to Alberta and you're working and you're coming back home to New Brunswick to your family, we changed that protocol so you no longer have to self-isolate when you return. So that is kind of the next step to moving towards the national side. So we're moving in blocks, but trying to do it in a way, if we pinpoint something, we don't shut everything down. We actually find it, control it, and then move on. The next step would be, after the opening of the Atlantic region early July, would be looking at across Canada sometime, let's say 3rd week of July, for third week to end of July, where you'd open up across the country. We're certainly looking at that as opposed to opening up with the US at this stage. However, we might have the control of the US side, because federally they did extend the requirements for 30 days, and that goes till the end of July, I think maybe July 20th or something. And that may change. So we may see different rules coming from the US at that time, which would open up the US border. But that's a month out, and a lot of things can change in a month. So right now, I would say towards the end of July, third week of July, latest, we'll likely see some changes that allow movement across the country without the isolation. We're unique in New Brunswick, or not New Brunswick, but in Atlantic Canada on the 14-day isolation. There's 5 provinces that are doing that. I think Manitoba is one, and then the 4 Atlantic provinces. But we felt like borders have been a key to our limiting of the virus spread. So we're cautiously moving to opening, not jumping to it.
Thank you.
Peter, can we move to question, comments from you?
Thanks again, as everyone has said, Mr. Higgs, for your exceptional leadership during this season.
Thank you, Peter.
No one envisions when they sit in a first chair that they're going to have to lead through a crisis like this, and we're really grateful for. I think what I've appreciated is the balance between caution and common sense that you and your government have seemed to exhibit. And so thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. My name is Peter Moore, and I serve currently as the district superintendent for the Atlantic Wesleyan churches. And recently we required 2 essential workers from Nova Scotia to come up to our campground at Beulah Camp, because our annual gathering, of course, has to be virtual, and we really needed a couple of folks to come up and help. And I just wanted to say how impressed I was with the WorkSafe New Brunswick people. Our MLA, Bill Oliver, helped us out and got us in touch with the right people. Lisa Waugh was an application officer. She was phenomenal. The committee that approved our request and worked with us, asking questions back and forth, and then the chief compliance officer and the peace officers at the border that allowed the 2 people in. They came in separately. They both had really positive experiences with all of that. And so I just wanted to say thank you to you for the exceptional work that your team is doing. It was timely, time sensitive, very professional, and great work. So some of the people that may be listening to this here tonight, or perhaps listening to the recording at a later date, may be serving on your team as WorkSafe New Brunswick employees. Certainly we have people in our churches that are needing to process these kinds of applications and work. And so I'm wondering, what would you say to your team members who are actually doing this work? Because it is not an enviable position to be in. I'm sure there are disappointments on a lot of days where they have to give hard news to people that want to hear different answers. And so what would you say to your team that may be listening, but also to the parishioners in our churches? What can we do to be an encouragement to the good folks in our government that are doing hard but important work and doing it with the diligence that we experienced? I was very, very pleased and impressed.
Well, thank you, Peter. I certainly appreciate your comments about what WorkSafe have been doing, and I've heard that from others that they're quick to respond and they work directly with individuals. And I always feel best when I hear outside comments about people in government and that are working to deliver better results for citizens. This has been a challenge. I spoke earlier about a singular focus, which I've seen people rise to the occasion. I've seen a lot of people working here endless hours to get things done or to respond. I think in addition to WorkSafe, I think about the public and compliance officers that are at the borders. They would run into some pretty irate people who would be coming, and we would turn them back. And it's not easy, as someone is, and not everybody was, they usually have a story of one kind or another, how they should be coming through. And it wasn't like a lot of cases were turned back, but I think of these people working 24/7 that were, along the border at night And they're not alone, but nevertheless, cars are coming and they're stopping somebody in the night and talking about where they're going, why they're doing it. And then we probably would follow up on about 25% of the cases to see, did they actually follow through with what they said? So these are people that have been extremely diligent throughout this process. And it's been, I would say, it's certainly encouraging for me to see that sort of diligence and that sort of commitment to protecting our province. I feel the same way with our ability to grow our province and work together to just have better results in all aspects of what we do, right from the social aspects to the values and to the economic. Then I would also speak, you mentioned about the congregation, because people in the province have been very receptive to following what we've put in place for rules to protect ourselves and others. And the patience, the dedication to doing that, I think has been exemplary. And so in addition to all of the support work that we have and the employees that are kind of seeing that the rules are being followed, the rules have been followed. For the most part, yes, you're bound to get violations. And the longer you hold back in weather like we're seeing now, the more difficult it becomes, the more impatient people are. And so that's why it's necessary to start to move and get back to life with COVID. But I found people have been doing their part. They're practicing the social distancing. They're recognizing they need to protect themselves and others. And they need to continue to do that, but life has to move on. And we have to get back to the values we have, the family connections we have, and we just have to make this an everyday routine. And I've often said about thanking, and done it in my conferences about thanking New Brunswickers for the diligence they have shown. And it's been encouraging. I'll go back a little bit to what you started. Somebody said to me not long ago, said, well, while you've been here, you've experienced a major flood, the second, well, I experienced the second one. You experienced this virus. When are the locusts coming? So I don't know if we have any insight into that or not.
Let's turn to you, Rob. You had a question?
Yeah, thank you again, Premier Higgs. Rob Nyland from River Cross Church in the north end of St. John. We've just been so grateful for the trust and stability and compassion you've shown in your leadership each day, and it's been wonderful. So thank you. Just a quick question about transportation. So we offer bus services, picking up members of our congregation. And then we also provide carpooling for our international students. So just wondering if there are any thoughts around either of those.
Well, certainly we recognize, and we had the restrictions on the carpool and trying to still keep the distancing, but then the mask would be key. And we're talking about mask of any kind, really. It's not a medical mask or surgical mask. It's just it could be there's many on the market now. We've had a lot of entrepreneurs, that have started in the mask business, and you can make your own. But that's helpful if you're going to be in close proximity to wear a mask, just to, and especially if you're on buses. I know any buses I've been on, they spaced out the seating. You go on in order, and the seatings are spaced out, and you come back off. But I did that recently at the military base, and so you can expect the military base to be pretty precise in how you'd move around. So I would suggest that in the cases where you're close to each other, have masks available, because that is a great way to minimize any potential risk or exposure, and if that's possible. And otherwise, in addition, I would space out on a bus if you can. That may not always be possible, but and certainly as we open up in the province, we're going to have people that are within our province moving on these buses, and in their community moving on these buses. And as I said earlier, we don't have signs of community transmission, and that's why we've opened up more in the province, and we're just saying use the normal public health requirements, but let's get on with life.
Great, thank you.
Sorry about that. We're moving toward a finish line here soon. Would there be other questions that you would have for Premier Higgs? Let's hear it, Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark Judicao. I'm in Moncton. I'm at a church called Moncton Wesleyan. I am the worship leader there, worship pastor. And so one of my questions I have is, you've already kind of, you might say, asked and answered, but we're kind of trying to drill down towards whether or not we're looking at guidelines or whether we're looking at legalities, because I would not do well in jail. And so I need to know if we allow our people to sing in church, with all of the strict physical distancing in place and all of the guidelines have been followed, the wording seems to suggest that we should consider it. And if it's been considered and if people are willing to accept those risks, is this something that we would be going against the heart of the law, if not the letter of it?
It isn't. It isn't something that we're going to be imposing or coming through the church and bringing the legalities towards it. It's a recommendation because it's an added risk. And it's understood that, singing, and as I mentioned earlier about being an airborne virus, it's an exposure. So the farther you can move apart, I know it's difficult to sing with a mask on, that can be a bit of a struggle. But for some of us, that might be a preferred option. I say that just because of the singing part. But the idea is that if you can social distance, the further you're able to do that, then the risk is minimized. But no, we won't be coming in and raiding the church.
I was my wife is a teacher in the public school system, and I was one of the lucky few who were in Italy during March break.
Really?
When I came home, I was living in the future, as many people said, because I was in self-isolation before most people were. And so I appreciate the hindsight that 2020 can bring, and how we can look back. Because at the time I was thinking this is ridiculous, and now I'm really appreciative of it. So we're always doing our best to try to guess what the future brings, and we don't want to step out of line with what the best research is that you guys are bringing and the hard decisions that you're making. So we support the decisions even when they're not easy. We're not trying to skirt around the law here for you. We're just trying to do our best to serve our people at the same time. So.
Well, and I thank you for that. And maybe you can say you kickstarted this and by your trip to Italy. So it worked out in both senses. But the idea in the church, I mean, people are going to be coming and going that are used to being with each other, or will become used to being with each other again, and they're community members. I think the added part of it is, how do you, as we open up, it's a case that we'll introduce new players that could be traveling, as we mentioned earlier. So it is respecting, with the distancing, with the masking, and being comfortable that, okay, I've provided a reasonable assurance here that my congregation can be here and be here safely.
Thank you.
Premier Higgs, I'm sure you've had no small number of people refer to this as a huge overreaction, and this is no big deal, and we just need to carry on with life as usual. How would you recommend, because we in church it's not real common for us to send people packing out the door. We're welcoming them in, right?
Yes.
How would you recommend we respond, generally speaking, to people who they're excited to be back, and that's great, but they don't really kind of live by the guidelines? And I'm envisioning some great sound bites of you that go on our screens at the start of every service, a 6-second clip of some sound bites from all your press conferences that we play.
Okay, well, I guess it's certainly welcome home. I mean, to have people that are used to attending, it's certainly a major part of their week, and I know how that all works, and for me and my wife and our family. I would say that people have to recognize that life is different. We do have a virus without a vaccine. And, if the demographics are similar, then they're different churches, but there's always certainly a fair amount of people that would be, 60 plus. And I think they need to recognize there's a way that they have to manage their activities to protect themselves, and not think it is back to the way it was. And in the way you set your church up for people coming in needs to be such that they see it right immediately that something's different. So before you ever speak, in the service, it's like already they see the differences, whether there's arrows or as you see going into a Canadian Tire or a Costco or Pensi, you see the arrows and movement. They see it's different, so they feel it's okay. This is not quite like it was when I left 3 months ago, and that brings the focus that okay, we're practicing a new behavior here because of the reality that exists. I think that everyone has to be cognizant and take ownership and individual ownership of their own health and not expose themselves or others. And they need to recognize that their moment of let's say, losing kind of the moment of what we're doing in public health could cause a problem for someone else, and that is unintended. I just want to mention something that it's a good news story, really. And I don't know how widespread it is, but we had a couple that got infected. They were both over their 90s. They were in the hospital together. They were in the same room. They both went through it. The husband started to recover earlier, and he wouldn't leave his wife, and she recovered, and they both went home about a week ago, fully recovered, and they were living at home on their own. So, you know, it was really exciting, and it's nice to hear those stories because most people feel that if you get it in your 90s, you know, it's you're not going to recover. So while the odds are not good, the older you are, there is that possibility, but I don't want people to take that for granted. I just like to say we've had some inspiring comments of devotion, dedication to your spouse, and it saw them both through a very difficult.
Nice. Are there other questions that anyone would have for our Premier today?
Neil, yeah, Mr. Higgs, if I could just follow up on that, and that is a great story. Thank you. And you've said it yourself. Everybody kind of has to make their own decision, their own comfort levels in terms of coming out in public. We're going to be physically distancing and all of that. But are there any special concerns or advice that we ought to be giving those who are older in our congregations about coming back, especially in the early stages, like in the next few weeks?
Well, I would say, you know, take advantage of the size of your facility and maybe you ramp up. You don't open it for everyone, and you open it up for a certain number. And I don't know how you can manage that. You know, physically people are going to show up. Well, you don't want to turn people away, as you were just saying. But it's the thing about the mask, having a mask with you is extremely important because people can feel comfortable walking in with a mask, and then they can feel comfortable leaving with the mask on. And that way it's so both cases wearing it in and out, it minimizes the risk if somebody just comes up without something and basically, you know, just wants to talk and haven't seen you for 3 months. Great to see you again. Because there will be that desire to have that connection again and have a hug or something like this because you haven't seen someone. So it again, I guess I reinforce when they come in, the process of being a little more official than normal. So someone may be not shaking hands at the door, obviously, because that wouldn't be appropriate, but directing more or less traffic. So it's illustrated very quickly that it's a new experience that we're under right now, for your own protection. And then when you do it that way and people see it differently, they have a mask maybe they're putting on when they come in, or asking them when they come in, do you have a mask with you? And maybe you have masks to hand out if they don't. But because these masks now are very simple masks, and that would be a real, I guess, that really sets the stage. And so you ask, they say, oh yes, we have it. Well, you may decide whether you have big enough hair, you don't need to put it on or not. Or you may say, well, could I ask you just to wear it to your seat? Or if you don't have one, you give them one. So I think that sets the stage. And then when you speak on it during the service, it becomes just a reinforcement. This is how we're going to manage our services from now on, because it's important that we get back together. And it's important we want to continue without causing a risk. But I feel that, you know, as a province doing what we're doing right now, without community transmission and dealing with public health and going through this, that we feel obviously a high degree of confidence that we should be able to move forward and protect people at the same time.
Thank you.
Anybody else as we get set to wrap up here soon? Okay. Premier Higgs, maybe I'd just throw it to you for some closing comments to this group, or maybe to just anybody listening who may be part of churches around New Brunswick, or outside of churches, just observing what we're doing in our communities. Maybe just a word of from where you sit about the role that the church is going to play, and that what your great hope is for New Brunswickers as we move forward.
Thank you, Neil. Firstly, I just want to thank you for organizing this, and thank certainly all the participants, and because it's great to have this opportunity to speak throughout the province to leaders within our community. The idea with the Zoom now, we're doing this a lot. We've done it obviously for the last 3 months. It's amazing that I refused to go to a meeting in Ottawa, and my colleagues all said, well, why aren't you there? Well, 2 of them went, and then they canceled it that morning while they were flying, and because of the outbreak in Ottawa and all this, we haven't, everything's been online since. So we've learned a lot through this process. We've learned how we can connect with people in a very meaningful way, and I think that every institution is going to find a way to connect more into homes through a social media contact. We've learned in the mental health side of it that, we can avoid some very critical situations in mental health if we have some point of contact with mentors or advisors or, people that can help them through that moment of anxiety and a need. And many times it doesn't take much on that first phase when someone just needs someone to talk to. So I would encourage us all, which is what we're doing in government, is to find new ways that we can connect with society to have a voice. And your churches provide, all churches provide such a meaningful connection to community and that mental health, that spiritual well-being, that really is the fabric of our society and the basis, I would say, of how the family network is so strategic to our province and to our country. I find that many ways what we've seen in schools particularly is that classrooms have become there's a whole lot of activity in classrooms that has gone well beyond what the educational aspects of it used to be. And so there's so many challenges in the community for different kids in different situations. And we try in many ways to meet them all within the educational system or within our social network. But sometimes I find that government can get a little disconnected to what's happening right on the ground, right in the community, right in the households. And we're trying to find ways to bridge those gaps so we can be more proactive, be in earlier. And you and the organizations provide a tremendous link that I think we only can benefit from a stronger association, a stronger connection with the ills of community or society, and how collectively we can work to improve them. And I guess nowhere is that more of a concern than in the basic family units, which are much different today than they were when I got married 42 years ago. But I know what it's meant to my family, and so families may be different, but they still need to be families, and we still need to find ways to support one another and call us all family, I guess, at the end of the day. But I just want to thank you for the great work you do and the great inspiration you are to the community and to our society as a whole.
Thank you, Premier Higgs. It's great to be part of this with you and to hear your support and your love for our province and your support for us as leaders within it. We'd just like to wrap up with a word of prayer for you. And I've asked Graham Perry if he'd lead us in that for you, for your leadership team, our province. And so I'm going to ask Graham if he'd do that now.
Let's pray. God, I thank you for this hour we've had together to share our hearts and to talk and just have a real candid conversation. And I thank you for our Premier Higgs and the leadership that he has brought our province. It's been incredible. And I'm so thankful for him. And you brought him into this position for the right time. And he has led us well. And we pray, Lord, that you would continue to use him in a powerful way to continue to lead us through this. and we look forward to whatever normal will look like moving forward. We look forward to it. God, I pray for all of our churches, just as we try to facilitate these changes and to facilitate keeping everyone safe, but yet still spreading the gospel to as much as we can. And it has become quite interesting to see how technology has played a huge role in our churches. And we see it as something that will continue to play a huge role moving forward, even if we can gather. And so, Lord, we thank you for all of our essential workers. We thank you for our hospital workers, our doctors, nurses, everybody across the board. And we just thank you that we can celebrate them. And again, thank you for this time and for Mr. Higgs. And we pray that you would just keep him safe. Thank you for his family. And we pray that you give him some more time with them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, thank you all so much for being part of this. This has been great.
I want to say a big thank you again to Premier Higgs for making time to talk with us tonight. What an incredibly important role he has to fill every day. The guy with the plan and with all the answers on the hot seat. You know, I don't think we always do a great job of seeing our political leaders as real human beings, but I hope maybe you do just a little bit more now. And I hope it reminds us all as believers to pray for our leaders. We believe that churches have a hugely important role to fill in all of our communities. We're more than just a Sunday gathering of people, although that is one expression of us. Can I just say this? Our churches have never once been closed during COVID-19. Our buildings and our gatherings, yes, but our churches, not at all. Meals have been served to people who are hungry. Groceries have been given to people with empty cupboards. Sick people have been prayed with and cared for. We've worshiped at home. We've shared the Lord's Supper. We've shared in the teaching of the Word. We've loved each other. We've read the Word together. We've done a lot of the same things that churches do, just in a different way. We've all been, in a sense, little churches in our own neighborhoods. So as we seek to figure out the gathering stuff again and get our doors open to the public, we just need everybody to work together toward the solution. It's gonna feel different and probably a little clunky for a while. Here's the bad news. Things won't look like they always did. But here's the good news. Things won't look like they always did. I think sometimes we forget that different can be better. And I think that very likely different is going to be better in the long run for us. So please keep praying for us, your pastors, we would ask, and for our leaders in our churches as we all figure this out together, and for Premier Higgs as he leads our province. And you heard the man, when your church reopens, go to the bathroom before you leave home. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's been great to have you. Let's keep being the church.